Good morning and welcome everybody to this third symposium. Bienvenue à tous et merci d'être avec nous pour ce troisième événement, soutenir une transition transformatrice vers l'apprentissage à distance et en ligne. I hope that this third symposium will be as exciting and fascinating as the two previous symposiums have been. As is our tradition, each time that we have an important event at the University of Ottawa, we want to pay our respect to the Algonquin people who are the traditional guardians of this land. We acknowledge their long-standing relationship with this territory, which remains unceded. We pay respect to all Indigenous people in this region from all nations across Canada who call Ottawa home. Nous reconnaissons les gardiens des savoirs traditionnels, jeunes et âgés, et nous honorons aussi leurs courageux dirigeants d'hier, d'aujourd'hui et de demain. J'aimerais aussi remercier nos partenaires dans l'organisation de ces trois symposiums et le soutien qu'ils nous ont apporté, le Conseil de recherche en sciences humaines du Canada, la compagnie D2L, Contact Nord et bien évidemment le SAEA de l'Université d'Ottawa. Bonjour, donc je me présente, je suis Aline Germain-Rutherford et je suis la vice-provost aux affaires académiques à l'Université d'Ottawa. And before starting really this session, I wanted to bring a few statistics about the three symposia. As you know, we started in November with the first event, and we had 184 registration. Then we had a second event in February where we had 174 registration. And for this third event, the numbers as of Friday, but I think that also during the weekend we had more registration. We had as of Friday 122 registration. This is wonderful to see that we were able to share, to discuss, this transition with so many participants. In terms of language, we had approximately 70% of Anglophone participants and 30% of Francophone participants. As you know, the University of Ottawa is bilingual, so which means that this event will also be bilingual in the sense that some presentation will be in French, some in English. However, we do have simultaneous translation during all our keynotes, and we have keynotes all through the day. So you will see, at the bottom of your screen, a little icon of the world, and if you click on this icon, you will be able to choose the language for the translation. In terms of participants, we had approximately 2/3 of participants from the University of Ottawa, and the other thirds are really colleagues, friends from across Canada, and we had also a few international colleagues who joined us during this event. It's wonderful to see that we had 34 administrators of different institutions who joined us during these three events. We had a large number of full-time professors, but even larger number of part-time professors, and this is wonderful to see that these part-time professors who are so important in our institution because they also bring the professional perspective into our courses. It's wonderful to see this large participation. We also had 89 support staff who are also essential, to help us deliver all our programs at the university. We also had a certain number of students and teaching assistants, and we also had librarians and also people from external organizations, partners from different programs at the university and elsewhere. So it was nice to see the diversity, in fact, of the participants for these first two events and this third event. I also want to really recognize a group of students at the University of Ottawa, students who are in the music department. You've had the pleasure, to hear them as we were getting ready to start this first session. You will hear all these students throughout the day during all the transitions between the different sessions. They have been so kind as they recorded, different pieces for us. You will see, you can download actually these pieces if you go on the website of the conference. So here you have the names of these different performers and additional also performance here. I really want to thank them, first of all, for their talent, because they are really beautiful pieces that they have recorded for you, but also for their generosity. They took the time to do all these recording for us. So thank you so much. But now, starting, this third event, rappelez-vous, la grande thématique donc, de ces trois événements, c'était donc de prendre toute la mesure transformatrice de ce contexte de la pandémie, qui nous a poussé à penser justement autrement, à faire autrement et à offrir autrement l'enseignement et l'apprentissage. Donc nous avons vu durant le premier événement comment nous avons dû réagir rapidement. We had to react quickly, and the first event was really about, okay, what did we do, but we were still on the reactive mode. The second event was more about, okay, from what we did during the spring and the summer, what lesson did we learn so that we could go deeper into our changes and also do better during the fall. And now for this third event, it's still, going on, thinking and rethinking what we do, but really also looking forward. Is the pandemic also an opportunity to really think about what our institutions are, what they can offer in a different, world? So this is the big themes of today's event. But as usual, before the event, we've asked you some questions and we collected your answers. And so here I'm just going to summarize, what you said. The first question was, en vous basant sur vos expériences d'enseignement de l'année qui vient de s'écouler, indiquez 3 outils, stratégies ou bien des pratiques que vous conserveriez même après pandémie. And here are the answers that we received. So a lot of you said, well, in terms of tools, yes, I would really keep, tools for pollings, Kahoot, for instance, tools for quizzes, lecture tools to engage even more my students, Q&A's tools again during lectures to engage the students. All the work done with class recording, with videos, this is something also to keep. And type of tools, I mean, we've discovered even more Zoom and the use of Zoom breakout rooms for group work, even online, the Zoom chat box, MS Teams, and eClass. In terms of strategies and practices, it's very nice to see that, interactive use of screen sharings, of having cameras on all time. This is maybe something I can tell you also during this event. It's nicer to speak to people and not to black screens. So this is something also that was, discovered and a keeper. But also in terms of pedagogical approach, flipped classroom design, group work, so collaborative work online, which is possible, in-class problem solving group sessions, which is also possible to do online, case scenario, case studies, all these pedagogical approach are possible online, and this is something to keep. But also a lot of questioning about accessibility, sustainability, equity, indigenous education methodology, which brings also the community even online, student consultation, better ways of working with students, but also a reflection on evaluation and take-home exams. So that was interesting. The second question was, identify one instructional practice that you would change or improve in your teaching context. And here again, really, anything where we can engage even more our students are really what you are telling us. And you want to improve on, strategies to engage the students. Also improve on empowering our students and working with them even more. They become partners, in our design and in the development of the content of the courses. Again, a lot of question about student evaluation. How can we do better? How can we better balance actually the learning and the evaluation online? Better using videos which are interactives. And also questions about laboratories online, hands-on, but also online. So these were interesting feedback that we received from you. I told you that the day is a full day, but it's going to be a fascinating day. First of all, we have three wonderful key guest speakers today. We're going to start with John Baker. Just after my little introduction, John Baker is the founder, but also the president and the CEO of D2L, and he's also a wonderful visionary to work with us, for what's going to be higher education, in the near future and in the long future. We will also have Pascal Blanc. Pascal Blanc is the director of digital, la directrice donc du numérique at l'Agence universitaire de la francophonie, and Stephen Murgatroyd, who is a consultant with Contact North, one of our partners, but also who is an advisor for so many governments in terms of education, in terms of technology across the world. So we are very lucky to have these three guest speakers to share with us, to interact with us today. We will also have a panel with our administrators, un panel avec nos administrateurs. What did we learn throughout this whole year, and how are we transforming actually the future of higher education? So we will have Jill Scott, the Provost and Vice President Academic Affairs of the University of Ottawa, but we will also have Jerry Tomberlin, Provost and Vice President Academic Affairs at Carleton University. We'll also have Chris Jensen, the Senior Vice President Academic at Algonquin College, and Lynn Casimiro, Vice President à l'enseignement et la réussite scolaire at La Cité. These four institutions in Ottawa, we are collaborating quite a lot. It's going to be so interesting to hear actually the visions of these four administrators for higher education. And then we will also have a session on a very important topic, which is experiential learning. And how can we even online expand and do better in terms of experiential learning and community service learning online. So for that, we will have Alexandra Baril, who is Manager of Community Engagement at the University of Ottawa, and Dana Matsousis, who is also at the Telfer School of Management and working a lot about experiential learning. And then I will bring you the concluding remarks, and we will speak about the future. We've had 3 events this year. We've share testimonies, shared experience. So I will explain to you, at the end of the day, how we're going to bring all these different experiences in a publication project, a collaborative publication project, so that you can tell us and tell even more people about the experience. I want to thank Jovan, Nancy, Banav, Geneviève, and Megan again for their extraordinary work for the organization of this symposium. We are lucky to have them. So thank you again very much. But here we are now at really the first session of this day. And we are so honored, but also so lucky to welcome with us John Baker, as I said, the founder, but also the president and CEO at D2L. And we are going to have 30 minutes to have a discussion with John Baker. I have prepared a few questions for John, but I will also leave you the space so that you can also ask questions to John, who I'm sure will be happy to answer. So here we are, we have John. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if you want to, when you ask your questions to John, open your camera. It's always nicer to speak with a face that we are seeing. I don't want to push you to that, but anyway. So anyway, John, thank you so much for being with us. It's just wonderful.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to start right away with my first question. We all know that, the pandemic has changed the way we teach for sure. It has changed our realities of teaching and learning. But even before the pandemic, changes were already happening, in terms of technologies for teaching and learning. And pandemic maybe has, reinforced that or maybe dispelled that. So I would be curious to hear you telling us about, the need for these changes and how these changes can, push us forward.
Well, I think the resilience of the education system has been nothing short of incredible. This was a major disruption to the system. That's without question. We saw clients literally all around the world pivot to fully online, effectively almost in a week or two. And so, incredible usage in terms of adoption, leveraging the technology to do things that they were not doing before. Faculty that had never taught online were all of a sudden teaching online and embracing the tools in new ways. So, it's been 2 decades for me building D2L. And I can remember in the early days convincing people to put internet into the classrooms, let alone just offering courses online. So it's been a long journey. And I think pre-pandemic, many institutions still thought of online learning as a nice to have. It wasn't a requirement to have this infrastructure put in place. I think that's changed. I think we've been pulled into the future. And when we do that, I think it forces us to really think about technology adoption and what it does with our classes, what it does with our engagement with students and with our fellow faculty members, and how do we shape the technology to really embrace the change that's underway. Marshall McLuhan has a great quote. First, we shape our technology. I'm paraphrasing. First, we shape our technology, and then the technology shapes us. And I think events like what you're pulling together here today are really critical in terms of us coming together, building a shared narrative of what that future needs to look like, so that we can build together, so that we make sure the technology is shaped in the right direction to enable a better education experience. Personally, I'm quite excited. Things that we would have seen happen over the course of the next 5 to 10 years are happening right now. And we're just pulling all that work into a very compressed time frame, which is hard. But I'm actually really excited about what this means for students. It's going to give them more flexibility, more choice, and hopefully a better experience and break down barriers to accessing high quality education from your university and many others all around the world. So I think it holds a lot of promise. Look forward to the conversation here too.
Thank you, John. Actually, you speak about, flexibility for students.
Yeah.
we speak more and more about, I mean, we've seen that students learn differently. And they also have, different stories to bring to their learning. They also have different, context. And so, speaking about individualization, in learning is more and more important. They also have different needs. And so I wonder, how do you see technology helping to ease towards, more individualized learning and to really bring the identity and the individual's identity of students into the learning?
Well, that's a really good question. And I think ultimately that's what we're striving towards. It's not about just implementing technology for technology's sake. It's how do we build a more human, more personalized, more flexible, more engaging experience for our students, and also to free up time, because there's so much around us that's happening. I think I need to maybe set a little context. The challenges associated with this pandemic have really shown a few cracks in the system, broadly speaking. There's nearly 200 million students that have not seen either a classroom online or face-to-face globally. So this hasn't been an equal scenario all around the world. There's been a lot of inequity. And each student, I think, has had many individual experiences through this. Some have done just fine. And have gone on to great things and have learned incredible without anything that's been really holding them back. They've had great, experiences at the university or elsewhere. But for others, there's been a lot of what they refer to as learning loss. The World Bank put a number on this of 10 trillion in lost earnings potential for this generation of students because they haven't been able to keep up with their learning, meaning that they won't potentially go off to university or college, or if they're in college or university, they're going to struggle to get out into the workforce. And I think that's a huge challenge. And we can take it either as a deficit mindset, where people have lost something, or to your point, we can personalize learning and race to that ultimate goal of trying to get from digitization to optimizing the experience to now a much more human transformed experience. It's more personal. We have to get there faster. To pick up from this challenge that we've all experienced. And I think ultimately when we get there, it means that we're building from a strengths perspective. So we're looking at an individual as a student, not as a number, as an individual, a person, and we're understanding their strengths. We understand what they have as opportunities for learning, and we work with them to actually optimize that experience to help them get to something they never dreamed possible. Help them actually exceed their own expectations for what they see as their possibilities. To me, that's the ultimate goal. It's, using technology to drive through that adoption curve, going from digitizing the classroom, which is, I think, where most people are today, to figuring out how to optimize for outcomes. Those could be just simply making the experience a better experience, or not having 1,000 logins, just having one, or it could be using a nudge to help students stay on the right track if you spot that they're at risk. But then ultimately, it's that final stage of transformation where we start to really make that experience a much more human, personal, flexible system.
Thank you, John. Before I go with my next question, I'm wondering if, in the audience, we have some participants who would like also to ask a question to John. I'm looking in the chat. And if you want to ask your question, just bring your camera on, and ask your questions. However, to give you time to prepare to ask your question, I'm going to go with another question for you, John. Oh, Marie-Pierre, John, I see that you have your ton pouce levé. Is it that you want to ask a question, Marie-Pierre?
Actually, no, I was agreeing. I'm thinking about it. Okay,
think about your questions. Okay, okay, great. So, John, there is a question also that we see coming up often. You spoke about, the difficulty also for some, to actually during this whole pandemic period, to access, education, to access the program. So technology is just wonderful, but technology also brings also that whole question of accessibility. in a positive way and also in a very negative way. And I'm wondering if, the way that technology evolved, technology changed, evolved very, very quickly. Sometimes professors say, well, it evolves too quickly because, I cannot follow. But with the evolution of technology, how can we also answer that notion of accessibility to education?
I think that's a great question. I remember wrestling with that when we first founded the company. If you were blind or deaf, as an example, it was near impossible to get to the education that you wanted. It was just simply not accessible to you unless you had someone helping you or sitting beside you, supporting you through that journey. And today, now, if you're blind or deaf, you can participate equally with everybody else in the same exact classes as everybody that you would normally go to school with. And to me, that's been a major game changer. But there's other pockets of inaccessibility. So, if you don't have internet access today, you're in a significant disadvantage. I remember visiting on a state visit to India a few years back, and we went into one of the poorest communities in the world and visited a girls' school there. And I remember, one of the girls standing up at one point saying to their teacher, "When are you going to teach us something that matters?" And I was, I thought to myself, this just got interesting. That's a really hard question because they were learning how to sew and they were learning Excel 95. And Her Excellency, the Governor General's wife, Sharon Johnson, jumped up and showed them how to do some exercises. And every one of those girls took out their smartphone and took a photo. And I put up my hand and saying, how do you all have smartphones? And they said, well, these are third, fourth hand BlackBerries. We use Wi-Fi or really inexpensive data plans. And it was a light bulb moment for me. If we build our technology in a way that supports responsive web, you could build it so that it can reach literally any one of these devices anywhere in the world. And you really have no barrier to accessing high quality education. It just it erases that final barrier. They don't have the latest iPhone or the latest Android phone, but they do have phones or devices that are attached to the internet by and large all over the world. And so, those things are ways to sort of break down these barriers. But I also think our work's not done. We're starting to do a lot of research now into different learning disabilities to drive access in better ways, improving the technology constantly to support better accessibility. These are all big areas of constant ongoing effort. It's not you check a box and you're done. But the one thing that we've always tried to strive towards is build it into the actual definition of being done. So you don't build software and then release it and then fix the accessibility. You actually have it as part of, before you actually release, it's a fully accessible solution. Now you may be asking me about a different type of accessibility. So maybe I'll throw it back to you. Did I cover what you were looking for there, or?
You did in a way. It's impossible actually to get, a full answer to the question I was asking you, because there are so many other aspects, in terms of accessibility. However, it's true that technology is actually helping, for more accessibility for education. So thanks a lot. I'm seeing, a hand. Gillian still has a question, and then we have also several comment and question in the chat. So go ahead, Gillian.
Thank you so much. I actually had two questions, although I don't know if both of them we have time to get answered. So I'd say my first question, we're talking about some of the challenges of getting some of these technologies implemented within the classrooms. Considering, we've talked quite a bit about the challenges from the student side, how do you see the approach from the administrative side? So what do you think are maybe like the top 1 to 2 steps that administrators can take to really improve the access to these tools for their students and get people on board?
Well, I think it starts with having a great anchor platform put in place to make it easy to integrate all these technologies together. We did a quick check of how many technologies integrated into D2L in the last 6 months, and it was about 1,800 different technologies, all with a single sign-on. So it launched over 1.12 billion times. So making it easy to integrate the technologies is one key role of the administration in terms of helping to facilitate that. And then also trying to figure out, where are we on this adoption curve? Are we just simply, wide open, embracing all the different types of digitization, all kinds of different tools? Do we want to try to optimize that towards what goals? Are we trying to improve retention? Are we trying to improve engagement with students, learner satisfaction? Are there other outcome measures that you have as a strategy? And I think that's another key part of what administration needs to do, is just help set the right strategy for the university or for the college or for the school. And then, as you try to think about the experience, which is that last big step in terms of digitization, what do we want that experience to be? And I think we want to be purposeful about that. Do we want it to be, a mastery-based model of learning or a competency-based model of learning that frees up time to give people back, time in their day so that they can go off and explore how to become a better researcher, better scientist, better entrepreneur, explore the big problems? Or do we want to have a more traditional program? These are big questions, and I don't think we should just walk blindly through the adoption of technology. I think we want to be very purposeful about it. Set the right goals, set the right expectations, and start working on, well, what is the experience that we want to have for students?
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I would say my second question, just because I don't see anybody else's hand popping up right yet, if you don't mind, would be, considering, as you say, like everyone around the world in some fashion now has access to really fantastic globalized education. What can different institutions do to really make themselves independent or differentiated from everybody else? So what do you think some of the key what do you think some of the best ways to kind of characterize yourself or as an institution to really retain or, bring in new people when everyone has access to everything around the world right now?
Yeah, a Zoom class is not differentiated, right? So doing things with Zoom is not the point of differentiation. I think the quality of the education is going to be a big part of this in terms of the experience. The group work, the collaboration, problem-based learning, the pedagogy behind the scenes is going to be a big part of it. But I think quickly moving through that adoption curve, so you have a beautiful campus experience, but what's the experience online in terms of reaching those learners all over the world? Are we going to be flexible? So if we want, can we bring in people that are in the workforce today to take some of these programs so they can continually be upskilled in that lifelong learning kind of mindset? Are our graduates going to be able to benefit from that kind of an experience? Being able to think about the quick transition from digitization to optimizing to really ultimately, what is that human experience? What's it like to be a student at the university? How do we actually create an experience that's going to really embrace the differences, the individual strengths, as was highlighted earlier? That's, I think, where the universities are going to have the differentiate in the future. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, that's very unique. Because we're trying to move away from it just being about the technology. We're trying to make it much more about the human, the person that's at the center of the learning experience. Cutting edge clients today are really thinking about how to become a learner-centered university, which is not an easy transition. And we also are launching a new technology right as we speak, actually, called D2L Wave. Where what we're trying to do there is trying to connect our employers with our university partners to provide upskilling and reskilling in this digital economy. So looking at digital skills as a critical factor as the economy goes from about 12% digitized today to about 50% digitized in the next 3 to 4 years, which is going to be an incredible pace. And every one of these employers needs help. There are lots of different directions you can go, as I just highlighted. But really, it's about being purposeful and coming together and saying, here's what we want that experience to be for those students.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian.
You're welcome.
If you want to do like Jillian, put your camera on. Seriously, it's so much nicer to see you, Jillian, and not a black little square.
We have a rule: you can be in your pajamas at D2L.
Yeah,
it's totally okay. Well, it's very rare for me to be wearing a jacket these days.
Well, thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you at Fusion later on this year.
Okay, so I have some question also, or some comments on the chat, and because we were speaking about, you know, the student experience, we were speaking also about student centered approach. I have, for instance, a comment from David Gray, whom I see also on the camera. Thank you, David, and hi. There will never be a perfect substitute for face-to-face contact with my students in either my office or in the classroom. So there's that sense, you know, that we still need also that face-to-face contact, which goes also with one of the questions I had prepared. How can we better build and maintain trust between learners and with learners in a virtual learning environment? How can we build that sense of community and trust even online, and not because this is something that we build also face to face. So I'm wondering, John, looking at where technology goes, and what is your take on that?
Yeah, I think David's on to it, right? Which is more time for one-on-one with my students is absolutely what we're trying to aim towards here. That's the ultimate expression of mastery of the technology, is when we can actually make that experience happen, give you back time to be able to spend one-on-one or in group work. I think that's really critical. Trust is really critical too. And I know a lot of universities are struggling with this. We do a lot of research in this area around trust and privacy and academic integrity. We actually just sponsored a symposium on this topic in Canada with the University of Calgary and a few others. There's no easy answer here. When it comes to our technology, we make it really easy for our clients. We say it's your data. We're not selling it to others. There's a trust and privacy around that data to really make sure that the students can have confidence in the system. And that's if that's ever broken, that's a terrible outcome for us and for our clients. So we never want to breach that trust, if you will. But once you get into the classroom, academic integrity typically comes up as the number one issue. And there's been multiple camps. There's folks that are focused on, can we change how we do authentic assessment to support moving away from the traditional assessments, which are potentially prone to academic integrity issues. And the cutting edge research on this says either way you do it, there's going to be academic integrity issues. There's no real silver bullet here yet in terms of being able to address this issue with students. So I think what we need to do is create a high trust environment with our students. If we think about a mastery-based learning model or a competency-based approach where, you're actually not expected to know something right from the start. You demonstrate learning over time on a learning curve, and that's okay. And I'm going to assess you based upon, where you end up, not where you start or the average. Being able to build trust through new pedagogies like that, I think will be a game changer, and it will be a much more authentic, real expression of learning for students as well too. Give them opportunity to explore new areas and new pathways too. But there's that could be a whole hour, and I could actually recommend some really good researchers in that space too.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And if you want to add anything actually about those recommendations on the chat, don't hesitate, John. We have also several comments. Actually, first a comment, John, you are so right. The most wonderful thing about Brightspace is that I have found a way to get better time with my students. Quality time, that's wonderful, even though the class is 70 students. Yes, you can break into rooms and so on. So thank you very much, Ruth, about this comment. But we've had also several comments about, so you are not only the founder of D2L, but also you are, the CEO of D2L. And we were wondering, as a president of a company, a company which really is devoted to educational technologies, and how do you see the future, not only of your company, because we are not here, for that, but how do you see actually, the big trends in terms of transformation, in terms of evolution of educational technologies and technologies like yours, for instance?
I think that's not an easy question. It's hard to predict the future, right? But before we enter this pandemic, education, broadly speaking, is a very big market globally, and it was less than 5% digitized. And so I think that's going to be a trend that sweeps. I don't think you're going to see every other industry and every other sector digitize effectively overnight and not see education do similar. So that will be a big trend. I do think the other big trend that I'm seeing is push towards mastery-based learning or competency-based models of learning, to teach the settled knowledge, teach things that are well known. Like if you're going to be going into an operating room, you should know the following procedures. That's a great format for teaching that way, and it also encourages this learning curve that I spoke about earlier, and freeing up time for the things that are not settled knowledge to go explore, which is really the old definition of study. It's I know it's going to sound strange, but I actually think the future is actually taking a step back to the old definition, one that you don't actually see in the dictionary anymore, of being able to pursue your passions, desire, zeal. This language that we've lost in the definition of study, I think needs to come back. But we only get there if we get really proficient in terms of how we teach the settled knowledge that's all around us. There's a lot more I could talk about in terms of technologies, but really at the end of the day, it's coming back to making that experience a much more human experience. I think David hit it right on, which is, we want to have that engagement with students. That feedback that you're giving those students is so important. If you look at our work right now in terms of things that we're releasing, there's a lot of work and a lot of research going into both assessment and feedback. And you'll see a lot more tooling coming out from us on that front as well too.
Thank you, John. I see that Alia has a last question. So Alia, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, John, for the presentation. I just have a technical question since you are the CEO of D2L. It is about the new tools that could be incorporated in Brightspace or LMS. And I'm particularly interested in the blogging and the other tools of blogging, because, if you are using new techniques of assessment, not conventional like essays and so on, you need to enable these external tools to be imported into Brightspace. And I do appreciate that we have the external stuff like Google and other tools that we can import it. But I'm just curious of any future plans to have such novel assessment tools. And I'm particularly, again, interested in the podcasting and I know franchise and names and so on, but if you can just attend to that, if there are any plans, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Alia.
That's great. I would tell you our plans for the future, and then they would be changed literally tomorrow. But I think the easy answer there is we're very strong supporters of the open standards. So in our case, we're the standards leader. We're certified in 17 different IMS standards as a good example, and that helps us integrate in over 1,800 different technologies today. And that could include blogs or podcasts or VR, augmented reality. Basically, any type of niche learning tool is brought in through these open standards to make it plug and play. Now, it's not without challenges. We want to make that easier. And there's other functionality that we want to bring in native to D2L. So anything around assessment and feedback, or being able to build out better learning outcomes or competencies, or supporting the learner's profile or portfolio, the learner record, the learning graph around that record. All of these things are things that we're building out, and then making it really easy to plug in, eventually, maybe even thousands of different, applications that support the learning experience. Because I think if we can harness the broader ecosystem of technology providers and even student created apps, it'll make our platform that much better for our clients. Now, I'm also a very big believer in students as creators, not just consumers. And so your idea around blogs is something I really want to get back to. Maybe a reimagined wiki kind of construct as well. There's a lot of work going into our new content service that we're providing, which incorporates a lot of video. Our video usage is up 35 times. So 3,500% up this year and last year. And our portfolio usage is up 7,500 times so 75 times, 7,500% this year, and more than that the previous year. So portfolios are a great example of like capturing and sharing evidence of learning. We're going to continue to make those types of technologies that much better. But no, thanks for the nudge. We're not anywhere close to being done. We spend tens of millions on R&D today, but we have a big dream for doing a lot more in the future. So thanks for the nudge.
Thank you very much, John. So we arrive at the end of this, talk with you. I really want to thank you, John. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, and thank you for the share of the sharing of your ideas, and thank you also our participants for their questions and their comments. So once again, thank you so much, John. I want to tell our participants that what time? I don't have my watch. I should have my watch in such an event. At 11 o'clock, we're going to have our second session, starting with, again, Pascal Blanc, who is the director of the digital service at l'Agence Universitaire de la Francophonie. And this session will be in French, but again, with the simultaneous translation. So thank you all for your participation to this first session. Thank you, John, and we will go on this dialogue that you've had with us at the university for many years. So I hope that we will be able to go on with that dialogue. And see you all, at 11. Thank you. Bye-bye.